You are not struggling because life is hard. You are struggling because you are still carrying things that were never meant to survive. This version of you, Carl Jung did not call it growth. He called it individuation. And it begins not by adding something. It begins by cutting something away. Most men spend their entire lives performing. They perform confidence they do not feel. They perform happiness they have not earned. They perform strength while quietly breaking in rooms no one sees. And what is the cost of that performance? You become a man no one truly knows, including yourself. Carl Jung understood this. He spent decades studying the architecture of the human psyche, not to make men comfortable, but to make them real. He said and understand this deeply, that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Not because self-acceptance is weak, but because when you finally see yourself clearly, the masks, the patterns, the inherited fears, you cannot unsee it. And that truth demands a decision. Here is your uncomfortable reality. You are not vibrating low because of your circumstances. You are not vibrating low because of your past, your enemies, or your failures. You are vibrating low because of what you refuse to release. Not what was taken from you, what you are still choosing to hold. There is a version of you, a quieter, more dangerous, more aligned, that cannot exist while the current version still clings to its comfortable suffering. That version does not beg, does not explain, does not perform. That version simply is. But to reach it, you must understand what Jung understood, what Machiavelli understood, what every man who ever commanded a room without speaking a single word understood. You must give things up, not because a motivational video told you to, but because those things are feeding on you. The first thing you must give up is the need to be understood. This is the silent killer of powerful men. You explain yourself. You justify your decisions. You want people to see your intentions, your pain, your reasoning. You want them to understand. But here is the judging truth they will never show you in a self-help book. The moment you begin explaining yourself to those who are not qualified to judge, you have already surrendered your power. Machiavelli wrote that a prince who is constantly justifying himself appears weak. Not because he is weak, but because the act of justification signals insecurity. And insecurity is the one thing that collapses authority faster than failure ever could. Give up the need to be understood. Let your silence do what your words never could. The most powerful thing you can say in a room full of people questioning you is nothing. The second thing you must give up: emotional transparency with the wrong people. You have been told that vulnerability is strength, and in the correct context, with the correct person, at the correct time, it is. But most men weaponize vulnerability against themselves. They give their fears to people who collect fears. They give their doubts to people who multiply doubts. They open their chest to people who do not know how to hold something sacred. Jung called this a projection. Others carrying our shadow. But there is a darker version of this. When you reveal too much to those who carry unresolved wounds, they do not hold your truth. They use it. Not always consciously. Not always with malice. But they use it. A man who operates at a higher frequency learns to become selectively silent. Not cold. Not disconnected. But deeply strategic about what he reveals, to whom, and when. Your inner world is not a democracy. Not everyone earns access. The third thing you must give up is identity built on your wound. This is the one most men will scroll past, because it is the most uncomfortable. Somewhere in your past, something broke you. A father who left. A betrayal you did not see coming. A failure that defined a decade. And slowly, quietly, without realizing it, you built a personality around that wound. Your humor became a defense mechanism. Your distance became a survival strategy. Your ambition became a war against the memory of being powerless. Jung called this the shadow. The parts of yourself you buried because they were too painful to carry consciously. But here is what no one tells you. The shadow does not disappear when you bury it. It drives. It makes decisions. It selects partners. It creates the same circumstances over and over, wearing different faces, speaking different names, until you turn around and finally look at it directly. You are not your wound, but you will remain its prisoner until you are willing to face it in the dark, alone, without flinching. These are not 3 steps toward positivity. These are 3 amputations. And like all amputations, they hurt before they heal. The fourth thing you must give up is the urgency to react. Watch yourself for 1 week. Not your habits, not your diet, not your morning routine. Watch your reactions. Watch how quickly you respond when someone disrespects you. Watch how fast your chest tightens when a plan collapses. Watch how immediately you reach for your phone when silence becomes uncomfortable. That urgency, that compulsive need to respond, to fix, to fill the silence is not strength. It is a leash. And someone, somewhere, is holding the other end. Machiavelli understood that the man who controls his reactions controls the room, not because he is emotionless, but because he has trained himself to create a gap, however small, between the stimulus and his response. In that gap lives his power. In that gap lives his strategy. In that gap lives the version of him that cannot be manipulated. Jung called this individuation, the slow, painful process of becoming psychologically sovereign. A man who no longer runs on inherited programming. A man who chooses his responses the way a general chooses his battles. Not every hill is worth dying on. Not every insult deserves your energy. Not every fire deserves your water. The man who reacts to everything controls nothing, including himself. There is a certain coldness required here. Not cruelty. Not indifference to those who deserve your warmth. But a disciplined refusal to be emotionally hijacked by people and circumstances that are not aligned with where you are going. Practice the pause. Weaponize your stillness. Let them wonder why you did not react. That wonder, that slight confusion in their eyes, that is your leverage. The fifth thing you must give up is the version of yourself that needs approval to move. This is where most men are frozen. Not by failure, not by circumstance, by waiting. Waiting for someone to confirm that they are ready. Waiting for permission from a father who never gave it. Waiting for the market to be right, the timing to be perfect, the fear to disappear before they begin. But here is the darkest truth Carl Jung left in his writings. The psyche does not reward waiting. It rewards confrontation. The man who waits for courage before he acts will wait forever. Because courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the decision that something matters more than the fear itself. And that decision, that cold, quiet, internal declaration cannot be given to you by anyone outside of yourself. No mentor, no woman, no audience, no number of followers. Approval is the most sophisticated cage ever constructed. Because unlike a physical cage, you built this one yourself. You decorated it. You called it caution. You called it humility. You called it waiting for the right moment. But the right moment does not arrive. You arrive. And then the moment becomes right. Machiavelli wrote that fortune favors the bold, but not in the way motivational posters interpret it. He meant something colder, something more precise. He meant that the world is indifferent to the man who hesitates. That power moves toward those who move first, who decide first, who commit to a direction while others are still calculating the risk. Give up the need for approval, not arrogantly, not blindly, but completely. Now understand what happens when a man releases these 5 things. He does not become louder. He becomes quieter. He does not become harder to be around. He becomes harder to read. There is a particular quality that emerges in a man who no longer needs to be understood, no longer bleeds in public, no longer circles his wound like it is sacred, no longer reacts on command, no longer waits for permission. He becomes unreadable. And an unreadable man is the most dangerous man in any room. Not because he is aggressive, not because he is cold in the way damaged men are cold, brittle, defensive, performing indifference, but because he is genuinely settled. His silence is not suppression. His stillness is not fear. His detachment is not numbness. It is sovereignty. Jung called it the individuated self. The man who has met his shadow, integrated his wound, and emerged not lighter but denser, more solid, more present, more himself than he has ever been. That man does not chase status. Status follows him. That man does not perform strength. Strength simply radiates from the way he sits in a room. That man does not explain his vision. He executes it. And the results speak in a language that requires no translation. You already know which of these 5 things you are holding. You have known for a long time. The only question that remains is whether you are finally ready to be honest about what it has cost you. The most dangerous transformation happens in silence, and most people never notice until it is already complete.